Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. I hope that you are healthy, safe, secure. Lots of responses and comments lately. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. It's always great to hear from you guys. It helps me understand not only your practice and your needs, but to understand my own foibles or, we being human is a constant state of improvement, isn't it? What a fascinating thing. One small correction. Apologize, Brandon. I had stated in an earlier video that he lived in Vietnam, and I have friends in Vietnam, but he lives in Taiwan. To a Westerner, there might not be a difference, much of a difference, but there is culturally and industrially in many ways, very different place. So my apologies, Brandon. No disrespect intended. Anyway, let's move on with the Gosho, where I think we'll finish it today. Is Nichiren's reply to a nun, the widow of Lord Ueno. He had taken on the Lotus Sutra Buddhist practice at the direction of Nichiren, so he's very much a follower of Nichiren's guidance and doctrines and instruction on how to properly practice Lotus Sutra Buddhism, Shakyamuni's Lotus Sutra Buddhism. And as wives were often, just as a matter of culture and embodiment of support for their husband, she too was a supporter of Nichiren's. I don't mean to take away from her own resolve to do so. She was resolute. I'm just saying that the culture of 13th century Japan, 13th century all over the world, women really identified with their role in a relationship. And men did in their own way, but certainly any modern woman would take that idea to task. Men were much freer to choose what they wanted to do, whereas women, and it wasn't a question of freedom so much as this was how you were raised as a woman, is that you were really not complete until you were paired with a man, and that it was your sole role, your duty in life, to be like this, the other half, the second half, the right arm of, the supporter, the man was more of the entire household, economy, everything, and woman took her place, her role within that. And it was really a very powerful union, a dichotomy. It wasn't like one was lesser than the other, although the argument is there's ownership involved and all kinds of behaviors, but that's a whole other video. I simply mean to point out that where a husband moved the farm, the family, the household toward the woman, just intrinsically became the supporter of that same thing. Her duties were different, but they were no less important. The household, the finances, the the breeding of children, all of that was a huge responsibility. Certainly no man could do it. So this was woman's role and valued as such. So, okay, I probably dug enough holes for myself in that little chat there. Let's just continue now. As Nichiren knows who he's talking to a very dedicated woman who is now left without that that direction, that stalwart, daily, ice-breaking male entity. And she now has to not only observe the household responsibility, the family responsibilities, and all of it, but she also has to have that protective power that usually the man would control, as was it Aristotle? I think it was Aristotle who said that the man was like outside the home, responsible for the gains of the ownership of property, house, power, protection, and the female was the entity that ran and managed that property and the house, no less important than the, right? There was a duality there. And when the man disappears from that, a lot more responsibility becomes on the woman, because other men will seek to take that away from a woman, because there's no protector, there's no front end to this ship, right? So, no small task. And Nichiren knows he needs to, in her time of grief of losing this man, that he needs to support her in a way that empowers her. And he knows that the teachings of the Lotus Sutra of Buddhism are definitely the path for her to realize and shed that samsaric cloud of, now I'm vulnerable, now I don't have, stop seeing your life that way, and start empowering yourself to be a complete human being. This is what Buddhism does. It doesn't really differentiate between man and woman as far as mental attributes and capacity. It's a very egalitarian system. And so a very foreign idea to women of, earlier. We're still struggling with this kind of thing, right, ladies? And there's no discrimination in Buddhism. You are just as able to awaken your Buddha mind as any man, right? And the Lotus Sutra nails that down. So, as we ended the last video with the statement, his filial children lingering on the banks of the river as he passes by. This is the river of the three crossings. This is a folklore. It is vain and useless to seek these matters anywhere else. And this is where he completes that transitional thinking, right? From all of these stories of hell, heaven, demons, all of these ways of visualizing death and parting and futures, and can I communicate with my deceased and all of that. Really, all of that happens nowhere other than in your mind. Nowhere else. Your relationships, your understanding, your inculcated behaviors from relationships and that seem to be outside ourselves, in reality, all occur within our own mind. And so if there's a hell to experience and demons to experience, the experience comes from your own mind, not actual hells, heavens, demons. They're what you, in samsara, inculcate into your emotional reality, and you experience them as real, when in fact they're conjured, they're constructed within your mind. So he's shifting the focus from these things didn't happen to you from outside of you, Your husband, even as you knew him, is your experience of him. That's yours. And as your talisman of husband dies, extinct, no longer existing, you can't communicate with him one to other, because the relationship was always within your own mind, your perception, your understanding of certain behaviors you had to modify and impose and influence and be influenced. All that relationship stuff, that's your own. And you still have it. It's not constantly reinforced anymore by a reflector in your environment. But remember, in Buddhism, our environment is ours. What does that mean? It wasn't that the man who was her husband was an illusion. He was his own entity, and he experienced himself and you in his mind. And between the two of you living together, you shared many insights, many understandings. But the whole time, that relationship existed in your minds, and the way he thought about it was his mind, and the way you thought and think about it is your mind. So in that way, his influences and your folding and becoming and negotiating that relationship, that's all you. And that's still there. As long as you're conscious, that's still there. Over time, without the reinforcement of the avatar, if you will, of your husband, is no longer there for you to mirror that sense, that working of negotiating and being with him will diminish over time. Not only because it's the past and it's not happening anymore and there's no validation for it, but also because you're having to replace those very mechanisms with your own. This is part of the fear of grieving. How am I going to do this on my own? How am I going to do this now? You're already working that out. And slowly his influence and the need for his influence and validation, which isn't extant anymore, it slowly diminishes. And over time, it's not that we forget about somebody, but all the little particulars that drive us, they slowly modify and change. And maybe we replace it with someone else, which if we do it too soon, we end up imposing upon them the habits and the learned behaviors that we gained from the previous person. And that's kind of unfair. But it's also how we retrain ourselves and our new mate or person into something they think they have to be to satisfy us. But what they're really satisfying is us in lieu of not having the other. So it gets really messy sometimes, doesn't it? That's why you need a pause. You need to come back to yourself for a while before you really commit to learning a new person and retraining your own behaviors in light of that relationship. It's complex, but this is life. This is the ebb and flow of attachment and understanding. That's our samsaric existence. And what Nichiren is pointing to is, if you're both solidly resolved to your Buddha, there's far less friction, far less discrepancy, far less feeling of having to relearn, and because both of you have the same resolve. And so things work themselves out more easily because there's this third entity, if you will, between you that's far beyond, far superior to any of the petty little attachments And so you change more easily because, yeah, I don't have to have that. And you influence more easily because the same happens the other way around. This is why a focused life on Myoho Renge Kyo creates equanimity, peace, right? This is part of the vows we take in a Buddhist wedding, understanding that our karmas are now going to intermix. And together, if we remain focused on Buddha, that process will become more elegant, more easily navigated. It will have its moments of great revolution and moments of sublime, wonderful coexistence, cooperation, because we're both working toward Buddha rather than discord. Make sense? So, let's see where he goes from there. Those who embrace this Lotus Sutra, Myoho Renge Kyo, transform all of this. For them, hell is the land of tranquil light. See this shift of understanding that the very things that through our attachment and our struggle not to lose becomes no, we're not losing anything, right? We're just transforming our perception. And that is Buddha. That is the land of tranquil light. Tranquil and light, because you see clearly and it's not emotional. It's blissful. It's wonderful understanding. That the differences aren't clashes anymore. The differences are different sides of the same petal of a rose. Right? Two sides of a petal of a rose don't clash. They don't argue with one another. They just exist beautifully as the petal. This is because the goal of the rose is beauty. All its various parts and differences just function in that same way. They aren't arguing with one another. Yeah. That's because they're not attached to their own finite existence. Its flames are the wisdom fire of the recompense body Tathagata. Again, this is the experience of Buddhahood in this samsaric physical form. The dead person is the Dharma body, Tathagata. Why? Why? It's not that her husband is now the Dharma Tathagata. It's the dead person in her experience, in her mind, that is now the shining light of the teaching of now being Buddha more than ever, because you don't have the false avatar, the false reflector of a husband, and rise at false. The husband, I'm not trying to get rid of the relationship or the man himself. What I'm saying once again is that man, that husband, exists in her perception. And if her perception is attached to the presence of the man, she's missed it entirely. Through Buddha, she understands that the physical man wasn't her husband. It was her relationship with the man that was her husband. And she still has that. And to enlighten oneself to that reality suddenly calms you. You haven't lost anything. Does that make sense? And we could argue all day long, Sam said, well, yeah, but she has no man. Who's going to be her samurai now? Understood. But her understanding of that relationship trumps that. That's why Nichiren reminds people all the time, suffer what there is to suffer. You're in samsara. Those things are there. But with a clearer mind of Buddha, your perception allows you to lose the attachment, lose the fear, lose the grieving, and instead replace it with the light, the understanding of the process of everything arising, decaying, dying, extinct, everything, including self, that the moments we have of realization far, far and away trump any kind of loss, because it's kind of a fake loss. We're transitory as well. And we still have that experience, so, right? That's the teaching, Tathagata, which one experiences when we chant the Daimoku. The wisdom of that, he says, is the reward body, understanding the great, amazing time and experience that you had in that relationship as it formed and continued, right? And what's the third body? And the fiery pit refers to the manifested body, Tathagata, whose room is great compassion. So again, in life, in this physical form, that's manifested body. We feel, we inculcate an experience of what the mind perceives, reward, dharma, in our bodies. It's where we feel emotionally the transitory phase of life. That is the manifested body, Tathagata. And the way with the other two, if we stay focused on Buddha, the way we manifest that physically, bodily, and right back into our mind, obviously, is compassion. A deep sense of love, appreciation for this physical form, which includes our environment, now altered. But this widow is now going to have a completely different perspective for other widows. Remember, this is the time of samurai. She's by no means unique in losing her husband to battle, right? So she now has a whole different level of wisdom because of her experience, especially if she continues to chant, on how to relate to other women so that together they can create bonds of strength as women without men taking over responsibilities that they normally would not expect to have to take. They all know it's going to happen. It's part of the teaching of growing up. But to experience it is far different, right? We all go through this in not necessarily the loss of somebody else, but this is our process in life. Constantly having to reevaluate who, what, and how we are in relationship to our environment and others, right? So this is a biggie. Moreover, the staff is the staff of the wonderful Dharma that is the true aspect of the Dharmas. The river of the three crossings is the great sea of birth and death, being precisely nirvana. Right? The sea of birth and death. Why is it a sea of birth and death? Birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Right? The 3,000 realms in each single thought moment. Over and over and over again. Birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. That's a sea of birth and death in your life, in your lifetime. And because we can chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, the more we chant for each and every moment, the more we shift our mind of understanding and compassion and being into our Buddha realm, the more we live our lives as the land, the pure land. The pure land, not because the land changes, but because our mind changes, our perception changes. And the mountains of death's departure are the layered mountains of, quote, the worldly passions being precisely enlightenment, end quote. You must understand things in this way. What does he mean? You must understand things in this way. It's a perceptive shift, right? He's being really obvious about it in this letter, more so than he usually is. But that's his great compassion for this lady. He wants her, desperately wants her to focus on Buddha, her mind as Buddha, so that she can properly understand the loss of her husband physically without the loss of her husband influence in her life, and how she can then replace that physical influence with what she knows, and how she will now modify that experience to be complete, wholesome, supportive. In other words, taking over those very roles she, in her samsaric mind, kept tossing out to this physical reminder. It's not that women don't need husbands and men don't need wives. It's that at a point of learning and experience, we can subsum our experience of other as understanding that it's our own perceptive and experience. So we stop having that link, that attachment to other in order to have an experience. We viscerally understand that the attachment actually got in the way of fully experiencing that relationship. That now, forcibly, physically, we are no longer attached. Boom. But nothing's left. From that point on, you don't have the physical validation, if you will, the mirror. But you're still here. You go in your bathroom, you take down the mirror and throw it in the trash. You don't stop existing. Your knowledge of what you perceived in that mirror didn't go away. You just have to go forward with all the knowledge you have without the mirror. In fact, it might do you some great good not to replace that mirror right away and live with the knowledge that you already know, whatever you've learned from that mirror. Do you see? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. You must understand things in this way. The expressions becoming a Buddha in this very body, quote unquote, and, quote, opening the Buddha's knowledge and insight, end quote, both refer to realizing or opening this reality. Devadatta opened the Avicii hell to reveal it as the perfect bliss of tranquil light. And the dragon girl's becoming a Buddha in her present body was none other than this awakening. This is because the Lotus Sutra saves both those who oppose and those who follow it. Such is the merit of the single character, Myo. So here he is defining Myo again. But what is he pointing to? He's pointing to this deep psychological, mental shift of understanding of how your very existence is this kinetic flow of energies, and it does not end or lose anything with the departure of a loved one, the extinction of a loved one, the separation from. Everything in our life occurs in our own mind. And if we can grasp that as the reality rather than just some aspect, we start to understand with greater fulfillment of the experience of life rather than this this bodily apparatus which is so sensitive to so many things. Of course, we still need to take care of it, but we need to take care of it so that we can continue having a mind as clearly and as wonderfully experiential as it is. Yeah? Bodhisattva Nagarjuna, he goes all the way back to Nagarjuna, he states, quote, "The Lotus Sutra is like a great physician who can change poison into medicine," end quote. The great teacher Miao Lo, Changzhan, states, quote, "How can one seek the land of eternal tranquility apart from the Bodh Gaya? Outside the land of tranquility light, or tranquil light, there is no separate Saha world," end quote. See, that's the primary illusion of human beings, is we made a decision that this physical realm we live in isn't part of us, isn't ours, that somehow it stands on its own as something. But in reality, everything we experience, the whole universe, let alone the ham and cheese sandwich, the cupboards, the land, etc., they're all perceptions of our mind. Pay attention now. I'm not saying those things don't really exist. But like the fountain analogy, go to the search bar on the channel and look for fountain analogy and let those videos come up. I've used that analogy many times. 10 people see the same fountain, but on closer inspection, if you really question them on details of that fountain, they all saw a different fountain. No, there aren't 10 different fountains that 10 different people saw 10 different things. It's the same fountain, but their experience, their categorization, their comparative knowledge, their understanding, their different ages, their life experience, all of it constantly factors into their own personal experience. Some will barely be able to talk about the components of the fountain, but they'll tell you everything about the flow of the water and how it dripped off the edge and curled around and held as long as it could till it fell, and so on and so forth. And others won't be able to tell you so much about the water as the sound the fountain made. It was like a dance. It was like an entire orchestra of sound. And it'll be like, wow, I didn't see that in the fountain. Right? That's a great analogy for the way we all experience the same things. Because the things aren't so much important as your experience of the thing. That's what's truly real. And the way you experience that fountain is because of your attachments, right? The person who doesn't understand architecture and isn't mechanically inclined, but knows the sound of the water, their attachments through life have been more related to oral sensations and consciousness than bodily feelings and so forth. We're all in degrees of difference, right? That's karma showing itself. These potentials of energy manifesting with their tendencies and conditions arrive at an experience that is never fully the same as another stream of potential. Different persons, different beings, different mental conceptions, perceptions, right? It's very poetic. He also says, quote, "The true aspect is necessarily manifest in all dharmas, and all dharmas necessarily possess the 10 suchnesses. There's that word again. If we think of all of those differences of the fountain, they're all real. They're all suchnesses. And the minds that perceive those particular suchnesses, it's not that they don't perceive the others, it's just a matter of valuation. Which suchnesses are they perceiving, and in what way is individual to the mind that experiences them? This is profound Buddhism. The 10 suchnesses necessarily possess the 10 realms, the 10 worlds. And the 10 realms necessarily entail both. They interpenetrate. The Buddha of learning, the realization of hunger, so on and so forth. And they're constantly doing it, 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. We're never in any one of them very long. We transmigrate through them constantly. Although our tendencies might be to gravitate toward a certain grouping, we're never in one world, ever. And the 10 realms necessarily entail both person and land, because there is no separation, really. Not in your life experience. There's a separation from yours and theirs, but not in yours. Body and land are really the same expression. The Lotus Sutra states, quote, the true aspect of the dharmas ultimately equal from beginning to end. Nyose so, nyose in, nyose en, nyose kan, nyose hon, nyose honmaku kyoto. End quote. From Fathoming the Lifespan chapter, the lifespan of the Tathagata, quote, since I in reality attained Buddhahood incalculable and limitless hundreds of thousands of myriads of millions of nayutas of kalpas have passed, end quote, I, in this sutra passage, indicates all beings of the 10 realms. Because what he's saying, and we could translate it differently in English, but it wouldn't sound like proper grammatically. I would say, if you translated the since I in reality attain enlightenment, what it could say, what it maybe should say, is that since Buddhahood that I realized pre-exists my human form by time without beginning, that's more logical. But I doubt that the people of 3,000 years ago would have been able to grasp that. Make sense? So Nichiren goes over it, and he explains it in a different way, simply saying, I in this sutra passage indicates all beings, of which you and I are one, of the 10 realms, whatever 3,000 realms you happen to be migrating through in each single thought moment, touched by Buddha, an enlightened mind. Since all the beings of the 10 realms are Buddha inherently, there it is, they dwell in the Pure Land. Our very manifestation as human beings in this universe is further evidence of this potential manifestation in flow constantly occurring. Understanding that we're part of this flow of energy, not static things. That flow has existed through the manifestation of time and space itself. Since all of the beings of the 10 realms are Buddha inherently, they dwell in the Pure Land. The Skillful Means chapter states, quote, the dharmas dwell in a dharma position, and the worldly aspect constantly abides. In other words, this is the fundamental formula, understanding, premise on which the entire universe is built. It is the way of the world that the aspect of birth and death abides throughout the three time periods of past, present, and future. There he's saying it again very clearly. Birth, death, birth, death, birth, death is past, present, future, past, present, future. You see? Thus, one need not lament or be surprised. It's just a flow we're in. This is the way things arise, abide, and disseminate, or dissolve. The single word, quote, aspect, encompasses the 8 aspects of a Buddha's life. My memory falters on those 8 aspects, but let's see what he says. 24. See the teaching approved by all Buddhas of the 3 time periods. Yeah, we've read that already. So, and these 8 aspects as well do not transcend the 2 words birth and death. To awaken in this way is what is known as a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, becoming a Buddha in this very body. So he's trying to eliminate this idea of separation. You are not a static human that can experience this other thing called Buddha. No. Your very existence as a human being, not static, being, constantly changing, moving, kinetic, momentum, your manifestation of energies as something you identify, you should identify not as Bob, Betty, Tammy, Bob, John, so on and so forth, but as Buddha in a referential form. The universe, you, I, the cat, the dog, the tree, the grass, is Buddha expressed in various potentials. Come back home to Buddha. Don't be so preoccupied with your particular potentials. Be grateful for those potentials coming together to express, manifest through this apparatus, the mind of perception. Now, clear up your perception without attachment to all that stuffness and see how everything is in that same flow of life. Everything commingling, all the potentials saying hi to one another. For the brief time you are able to manifest this mind. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Yeah? This is tough. This is profound. And so the next paragraph should come as no surprise. Your late husband was a practitioner of this sutra. So there's no doubt that he attained Buddhahood in this very body. How can there be? If he said Myoho Renge Kyo once, he understood Buddhahood. So do you. You need not grieve for him so much. Yet, this grieving of yours is the way of ordinary people. What does ordinary people mean? It doesn't mean lesser people. It means people who haven't discovered their Buddhahood yet. They may not even know how to attain it. Or they're caught up in all sorts of other myriad religious practices and hocus pocus. They continue to live their life in ignorance and suffering, when all the while they could just awaken to the amazing nature of life right now. But because they don't know that, they're just ordinary people. They're not evil. They just don't know. In fact, even saints lament. Because what are saints? They're people who practice belief systems rather than Buddha. When Shakyamuni Buddha entered into nirvana, his great disciples grieved amid their enlightenment. Even the bodhisattvas that were present as Shakyamuni took his last breaths were grieving the loss of this great teacher. Why do you think that is? Fear. Because they thought they were losing their great teacher. In the midst of their enlightenment, they still didn't understand that Buddha was theirs, in their minds. It wasn't going anywhere. They hadn't lost Shakyamuni, they lost Siddhartha Gautama, but that wasn't the value they had for this man, this great saint of the Shakya clan. It was his teaching, his Buddha experience, that they worried would be gone. But they still didn't get that it was in their own capacity for enlightenment. All they had to do was chant. But they didn't have confidence. Their resolve was weak because, as Shakyamuni explained, if I stay here, people will they won't get it. They won't, what's the word he used? They won't feel urgency about experiencing Buddhahood. They'll always put it off on me being here. And I'm not enlightenment. Enlightenment happens only in you because it's your mind of experience. When Shakyamuni Buddha entered into nirvana, his great disciples grieved amid their enlightenment, perhaps to display the behavior of ordinary people. The way they acted was like people who don't even know this teaching. Like they were actually going to lose Buddha. They still hadn't inculcated in their minds that Buddha was theirs. It's yours. It's mine. I say it all the time. Nobody can give you Buddha. Nobody can do it for you. Nobody can take it away either, because it's always there. You just need to snap to it. Gosh, it's hard to really understand, really grab onto that. Know it, right? By all means, offer memorial prayers to your heart's content. I'm not castigating you. We have them in Buddhism. We have memorial ceremonies for the deceased. But our attitude, our perception of what we're doing in that ceremony is forever altered by understanding that they were influences in our lives to help us get through our thick skulls sometimes that we are Buddha. They were facilitators to that, and they experienced it for themselves. Buddhahood, the constantly abiding treasure of knowledge that we all know we are participating as in of the same process, life. A virtuous man of antiquity has left us the words, maintain the ground of the mind in the ninth consciousness, right? The Amala consciousness. Buddha. But keep your practice in the six consciousnesses. Because in the mind of Buddha, all you would do is sit all day and smile at the amazing process of life. But we are, after all, human beings. And so the way of attaining and maintaining and requiring that clarity of mind, we practice in our six lower worlds. From hell to hunger to animality to bliss to humanity. In those six worlds, we get a Butsudan. We enframe, we enshrine a mandala. We protect it. We remove all distraction from it. And we invoke our Buddha. Because in this form, in samsara, we are not coursing in this body as Buddha, because Buddha is mind. But the closest we can come to maintaining that mind in this samsaric form is Bodhisattva. And that's what a fully accomplished Bodhisattva is. It's you and I walking this samsaric, amazing reality, quote unquote, with the knowledge that it's all happening, verb, around us. It's not ising. This isn't this. It is thising. Everything's a verb. Everything's in process. Everything's moving. Everything's changing. And if we see everything that way, obstacles melt because we understand everything's changing. So get it with the flow. Stop trying to make things static, permanent. That's where your suffering comes from. Follow? This is quite reasonable, Nichiren says. In this letter, I have written my hidden doctrine. In other words, I've shared my insight, my deep, profound personal insight into Shakyamuni's teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Not everybody gets this, but this is what I, Nichiren, am here to promote, this understanding, so that you know the nature of Myoho Renge-kyo, the value of having your Buddha mind enlighten your life, alter your paradigm, your perception of everything. Keep it secret with my deep respect. He shared with this woman, a nun, obviously a practitioner of Lotus Sutra Buddhism. We wouldn't call her a nun otherwise. The 11th day of the 7th month, Nichiren, with his written seal, reply to my lady the nun, widow of Lord Ueno. So right there in this very compassionate letter to a woman he obviously has great respect for, her learning, her commitment to the teachings of Buddhism, and her husband's commitment to the teachings, he wants to remind her, as she grieves, go ahead, have your memorial ceremonies, concentrate on your husband's influence and his merit and his gift of your development in your life. No less than Buddha itself did he bring you to. It was his influence as a follower of Nichiren and Nichiren's direction in practicing Lotus Sutra Buddhism. Be supremely grateful for that. Have a ceremony to be grateful for him. But never forget that all your experience of him, his great contribution, his influence to you, all of it occurs in your mind. It wasn't held in his physical body. It was in your mind's perception of the world at large with his influence and your perception of his influence. Your inculcating of his knowledge is your knowledge. Don't let that be buried with him. That's just his physical body. All of the wonder and gratitude and perceptive opening up of your life, your Buddha wisdom, you did that. You did that. Nobody took Buddhahood and drilled a little hole in your skull and squished Buddha in there. No, it's been there all along. Your realization of it is your effort. So celebrate it. It's amazing. Yeah, telling this to a woman who's grieving at the loss of her husband in 13th century samurai shogunate Japan. How much more revolutionary was this kind of thinking almost 3,000 years ago? It's no wonder a lot of people wanted to throw rocks at him and tell him to shut up. He didn't know what he's talking about. You're breaking my brain. Right? How revolutionary. And yet, so simple that it's difficult to hold on to understand, to inculcate into our very perception of the world, right? This is an amazing practice, folks. And the kind of resolve and confidence you need to build to know, yes, I see this, I know this. It's incredibly, profoundly life-changing. It doesn't happen all at once. It takes effort. You'll get there. You get there every time you chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. You get there. Just a little bit. Just a moment. And another moment. Another moment. And another moment. Keep going. You're there. The effort is in staying there. All right. I've gone on long enough. I really wanted to finish this Gosho today because it completes this whole idea, this thinking. A really amazing, Nichiren was an amazing teacher. All I can do is try to emulate his effort. What a great mentor. And he's your mentor too. All right. I'll let you go. Thank you for being a part of this discussion. Download the podcast if you just want to listen to it. I know I'm a very visual speaker, but I think that the oral podcast can be helpful, easily obtainable and downloadable. And don't forget the website, threefoldlotus.com. Lots of documents there for you to read or download, print, whatever. It's all free. My patrons, gosh, you guys are impressive. And you have this glorious opportunity to be able to share and donate some financial support. Not everyone does. So that's a tremendous boon for our Sangha and for you. But, don't be dismayed. Liking and subscribing and sharing these videos is an act of Sangha and support as well. So you're no less important. Thank you all, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.